Good day and welcome to today's Dr. Anyoha's podcast. Today I am going to be talking about how infants and toddlers feel when they lose their fathers. Toddlers are kids who are about 2 or 3 years old. How do they feel when they lose their fathers? And even infants like babies who are 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, how do they feel when they lose their fathers? This podcast is inspired by the recent shooting and death of Charlie Kirk in United States. But obviously, people, when they send their condolence, reference his children who are infants and toddlers. All over the world, there are kids who lose their parents all the time. Kids lose their parents all the time. Wherever there's war, be it in Palestine, in Ukraine, in Congo, in Nigeria, any part of the world where is war, kids lose their parents all the time. Infants, toddlers, babies, newborns, they lose their parents all the time. They lose their fathers all the time. So how do they feel? Do they feel anything? Do they feel anything when they lose their fathers? This podcast to get into the mind of the infant, the baby, the 2-month-old baby, the 4-month-old baby, the 6-month-old baby, the toddler. How do they feel when they lose their fathers? Of course, they feel a lot of stress. And how do I know that? Well, if you've been studying infant mental health, if you're in the field of infant mental health, or if you're an expert on infant mental health like I am, having had a doctorate degree in infant mental health and also having been a pediatrician for 25 years, I'm an expert on infant mental health, and I could get into the mind of babies and infer or speculate how they feel when they lose their fathers. Of course, it depends on the age of the babies and age of the infants and toddlers. Some toddlers who are very precocious in language and words would express how they feel, would ask questions. Where is dad? What's going on? Is he coming home or not? And looking out for him. So there's a sense of loss. There's a sense of something is missing. They may not be able to communicate that adequately in precise words and actions, but they know something's missing. Even babies 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, they know that something's missing in their life. That this person who comes in at a certain period during the day to pick them up, to hug them, to kiss them, to feed them, is no more there. It's no more there. Something's missing. So they've been conditioned to wait for the arrival of fathers. They've been conditioned to wait for the arrival of fathers, to hear the sound of his voice, to feel the texture of his touch, to smell him, to feel his presence. They've been conditioned in their short life, 2 months, 4 months of life, to expect this person who picks them up and hold them up in the air, and suddenly this person hasn't shown up. They can't smell him, they can't feel his presence, they can't feel his touch. Something's missing, and they're wondering, they're looking around. Their mind is like an antenna trying to figure out where has this person gone and when are they going to come back. It's clear the touch of moms are not the same thing as the touch of dads. Alright, the way a mother holds their baby is not the way a father holds their baby. So babies are able to distinguish between the feel of their parents. So when that fatherly touch, fatherly smell, fatherly sense of humor, fatherly play is missing, the babies know. They know that something is missing, and how do they show that? How do they show that? You show that in different ways, depending on their age. The toddler will be, of course, asking questions, and when doors open, they will just ask if it's dad coming or what's going on, when is dad going to come home. And they can ask questions if they are at a viable age to express themselves. But the infants, the 6 months, the 7 months, 8 months, they could also have subtle signs and symptoms of loss. For example, they can experience difficulty in sleeping. While waiting for this person to come back, they could stay up and hang out and see, hey, maybe if they wait longer, this dad will come back. So they could have insomnia, difficult to fall asleep. They could refuse to eat, loss of appetite, and could have nightmares as well. Nightmares where they dream of this person coming and they're not there. Nightmares sleep disturbances, refusal to eat, and of course, emotional upset. They're sad. They're not as effusive. They're not smiling as they used to be. So these are the subtle things that babies and infants could express to show that this person who they love so much and been with for so long is missing. Something's missing in their lives. So these are subtle signs when infants and toddlers miss their parents, or especially their fathers. Like I said, fathers are irreplaceable, just like mothers. The babies can tell when their fathers are missing and know that something's going on. A chunk of their life is missing. How do families and caregivers begin to fill in this gap? It's important to recognize these social-emotional changes in babies and loss. It's good to understand and appreciate that and begin to fill in the gaps, spend more time with the infants to see if we can fill in the gap and the gap created by the absence of that. More attention, understanding why the infant is not sleeping and provide comfort and try to explain for kids who reach the age of understanding, try to make sense out of what's going on, try to explain, try to be supportive. But the most important thing is to understand that babies, infants are just like adults, feel the loss of fathers. Even though they cannot express how they feel in graphic details, they can show that in the emotional expression, sadness, crying, clinging. They might begin to cling to the mother or to any family members because they're scared. They have anxiety. And the anxiety of a sense of loss. A sense of loss can create anxiety. So clinginess, excessive clinginess. They don't want the remaining parents to leave because they might lose them. Excessive clinginess is part of signs and symptoms of how babies and infants or toddlers express their loss. So what is the solution? The solution is to find a mental health therapist for these infants and children to help with the intervention of trying to resolve the loss and to find resolution. And intervention is very, very essential. Caregivers should try to be there for the child. A loving adult could begin to ameliorate and begin to support the child or support the infant until they could get over this trauma of losing their father. And another sign is falling behind in development. A child, because of trauma due to loss of father, could fall behind in their milestone, in their social-emotional milestone. A child who is already walking might fall back and start crawling and backslide in their already achieved milestone. Bedwetting. They might begin to wet beds if they had achieved continence. If they had achieved a dry night, they might begin bedwetting as well. So backsliding in milestone could be a sign of loss, that this child is feeling some stress and trauma. This kind of stress and trauma could make a child or infant backslide in their already achieved milestone. Like they could, where they've been walking, they could stop walking and start crawling, or where they've had some languages, they can lose their languages or some words they've acquired. So backsliding in development, it could be part of ways children could go as a result of loss of parents and fathers. It's very good to address these potential symptoms and be on the preventative side. Parents or caregivers should not neglect the importance of loss or how loss of a parent, a father, affects children. Don't ignore it, because this unresolved trauma has an uncanny way of expressing itself in the type and quality of relationship an affected child has an adult. Of course, how they view the society around them, the society that has permitted such a trauma to happen. An unresolved trauma like that could impact the way the child looks at the world as an adult. The child might blame the society around them for permitting this kind of thing to happen to them. So this has to be addressed. How the child feels has to be addressed. We should not neglect how the child feels when they lose their parents, their fathers, even when they're infant, even when they're 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. We should not fail to address that. Seeking the help of a mental health therapist is very, very important. And the intervention and the support of a loving adult to fill that vacuum is also very important and essential. Thank you very much for listening. I hope I've shared some critical messages here in this podcast, which is that infants as young as 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, toddlers understand and they feel the loss of parent, their father, and they play out the scenarios in their brain and wonder what happens to this person who's missing. And these feelings, though internal, usually present with symptoms, some subtle symptoms which adults, if they don't look for it, they won't say it. Okay, I've mentioned that already. Crying, clinging, excessive crying, trouble with feeding, backsliding on achieved milestone, insomnia, and so forth and so on and so forth. So the remedy is not to ignore these things and to be preemptive in looking for an expert mental health who could guide parents and guide a child to help resolve this conflict. And of course, critical is the presence of a loving adult who would try to fill in the gap of a missing father. Thank you so much. This is Dr. Anyoha. I am a pediatrician for 25 years, and also I'm an expert on infant mental health, having gone to 3 years of graduate school and got my PhD, doctorate in infant mental health. So this is the aspect of this education I think that is very critical. Being a pediatrician is important, but also being a pediatrician that understands the mental health of infants and babies and toddlers is very, very also important to me. And I think my graduate education in the field of infant mental health has brought in some richness to my practice as a pediatrician, and who's able to get into the mind of a baby and infant and toddlers and share what they feel when they've lost their parents, especially their fathers. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Share it with your friends and family. Thank you. This is Dr. Anyoha.